Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. And hey, welcome to the program, everyone. I hope that you're having a fantastic day and you're ready for, well, I can safely say one of your favorite segments. And that is, of course, our all Linux program with the one, the only, the venerable Mr. Marcel Gagnier. So, hey, we'll be joining him in just a moment. But before we do, first things first, as always, computeramerica.com. That's where you'll find everything, including today's show notes. You'll find past shows, future shows, and more, all at computeramerica.com. You'll also find links to anything that we talk about. Marcel actually does the show notes for these shows, and they're very in-depth, they're very good, and sometimes we don't even get to all of them. And when that happens, hey, a little bit of bonus reading there for you. So, computeramerica.com, find us on social media, so on and so forth. And yeah, I don't think there's all that much I really need to kind of mention. Again, just everyone, hopefully you're having a great day. So, why don't we go ahead and introduce Marcel and get this show going. And as I said before, he is our Linux correspondent. And really, I got to say that of all the fans out there, there's something about the Linux community that just really, and Marcel talks about this all the time, it's almost as much an ideology as it is a way of, kind of running your system. And they're passionate, and it's a good passion. I'm not saying that they're fervent zealots and things like that. I'm saying that they are, they have an idea how things should be run, and by golly, they are going to, of course, they're going to live their virtues and not just espouse them. So everyone joining us on the program, Marcel Gagnier. Marcel, you're unmuted. How you doing? Welcome onto the program.
I'm unmuted. Hi. Well, thanks for having me on the program. It's good to see you again, dude. How you doing?
Yeah, it's been a little while. And I mentioned that you're unmuted just to keep you in check that I can mute you again if things... No. You're good. It's been a little while. Happy to have you back on the program. And since we last talked, I think we went out to CES. That was a big thing. Got probably the worst flu in my life coming back from that thing.
Oh no. Was it the Wuhan flu?
And I don't want to say this, but there were a lot of Chinese nationals there because CES is hugely, when it comes to CES, there's a lot of Chinese company and a lot of Chinese presence there. And I heard one report from the CDC or World Health Organization saying that they might have to consider the gap where people can start to experience symptoms from 14 days to 24 days. And I got the flu within 24 days of being at CES. And I'm like, I am going to die today. And then I didn't. So we are all very happy about that. But I got to say, I'm feeling good now.
I'm very happy that you didn't die. But first of all, just like I confess that yes, I'm following this like everybody else is. I even have like a coronavirus tracker app on my tablet, so every day I can check out and see how many people have died, that sort of thing. Just I know it's extremely morbid, but it's kind of amusing as well. But here's the thing. Here's the thing.
Hmm.
Um, the death rate is like the mortality rate is actually around 2%. Okay, so it's not exactly like a major killer by any stretch of the imagination. And typically, the people who actually are in trouble are people who are who already have who are already weak, who have reduced immune systems for whatever reason.
I believe the safe term is immunocompromised.
And that is seriously, so there's like
Yeah, no, and I think that a lot of people are tracking this because right now, and really, it's almost like a spectacle because so many people are watching it, and they're like, everyone who has sneezed in the past 2 weeks is now,
I know, but
yeah,
here's the thing: the vast majority of people who get this thing won't even know they've got it. It's like they've got a couple of days, where they've got a little sniffly nose, and it's like, I feel like I've got something, and then everything is back to normal. Do you remember? Do you remember when what was it?
swine flu.
The mosquito-borne virus.
Oh,
No,
Zika.
no, not Zika, not Zika. Zika is pretty serious shit. But I'm talking about the West Nile virus. Did
Yeah,
I say
that too.
a word I'm not supposed to use on a podcast there?
Yeah, definitely not. But go ahead.
But you remember the West Nile virus? It was one of those things that was like, oh my God, we're all going to die from the West Nile virus. And then it was like, and then there were a lot of birds. Frankly, there were a lot of birds and a lot of animals who succumbed and so forth, but almost no humans did. A few did. And then what they said was that, 2 years later, almost everybody was basically immune because most people got it and didn't even know they got it. So,
Right.
so as I understand it with this, like right now, so they're tracking at like 80,000 confirmed cases or something like that. I could bring up the app and go take a look at it. The fact is, it's probably more at this point, a couple 100,000 that are actually infected or have been infected. And most of them will never know they had this thing,
I
like
I
ever.
I think where a lot of the panic came from was that this is something new, and you're absolutely right. I mean, the fatality rates are somewhere around a flu, the seasonal flu, that goes around every single year. It's just it's new, it's different, it's something that we haven't seen before, and yeah, it really it just seems like people were looking for something to react to, and seems like as good as
Yeah.
anything
I
to
don't want to.
react
I
to.
mean, I don't want to make too light of this because the idea of a pandemic virus, being released, especially when we have no protection for it, is nothing to laugh at. I mean, it isn't. But you sort of have to take these things in context as well. I mean, if the mortality of this thing was sitting at 25%, in other words, and I'm, God help us, but if there was that kind of mortality rate, well, obviously I would be, I'd be shaking in my boots along with everybody else. But yeah, as you said, immunocompromised, like the weak, the people who have something else that they're fighting already. I understand that, and of course, one of the things you do is you get your flu shot, which may not protect you against this particular thing, but will reduce the symptoms quite conceivably of anything else that comes your way because your immune system is already on alert. Um,
Yeah, no,
yeah.
you're right. I mean, we just talked about how the Geneva Motor Show, which is where they show a lot of cars and a lot of tech. I guess Switzerland has banned any gatherings over 1,000 people,
I
and
know.
yeah, and I got to say that, ladies and gentlemen out there, uh, I don't think we have to tell our audience that self quarantine is a perfectly acceptable way to stay home and play with your toys, and it should be good to go.
I think
You
it's a
you
great
be safe.
excuse. I think it's a great excuse, and people should stay home and watch past episodes of Computer America.
There
And
you go. Yeah, you should definitely listen to that show 5 years
see
ago about
what I did
technology
there?
that's
See what I
totally
did
not
there?
relevant. I've come to the realization, after looking at our numbers, people don't watch shows past like I'd say like 2 or 3 months, and that's fair because the topics that we talk about are very time sensitive, and
They
and
are. They are.
and so that's perfectly okay. And speaking of time sensitive, hey, why don't we go ahead and really kick off the show and not just be a mouthpiece for the CDC, and instead talk about our program here today. And before we do, Marcel, a little bit of introduction for yourself and what it is you try to do here.
Oh well, okay. I mean, I've been talking about and writing about Linux and open source software for a lot of years. And in fact, I started writing professionally in computer magazines back in 1999. When the hell was it? Is it before that? It's before that. No, it's before that. It's a long time ago. Anyway,
Yeah.
whatever the heck. It was a long time ago. I mean, I wrote for Linux Journal. I wrote for Ubuntu User Magazine. I've written for a lot. I've done radio, obviously, radio here.
Mm-hmm.
I've done television. I mean, I used to be the Linux guy on Call for Help with Leo Laporte. I've done conferences, and of course, because I like this stuff and I think it's cool, I continue to do it. And now I produce podcasts. I do videos on YouTube. So I'm still out there doing this Linux and open source stuff, mostly because I've been doing it for so long that it's still fun. So
Perfect.
that's why I'm here, because it's fun. It's fun.
It is fun. It is fun to to be here with you, talk to you, and I'm not going to chalk up of course, I know that you enjoy my company, but the wine doesn't hurt either. And we see here that you're taking sips from it. Everyone should be listening to the show with a nice glass of wine. And hey,
Of course.
yeah, you picked one out today. What do we got?
Okay, so the wine that I've got today is it's Toro Bravo, which is actually a Spanish wine. It's a 2018 Verdejo Sauvignon Blanc. I can say Sauvignon Blanc without too much trouble. Verdejo, I have a little bit of trouble with, and it's from La Mancha, Spain. And about 70% of the grapes on this thing are actually Verdejo grapes. And as you can probably tell, if you're watching, the video portion
Right.
of this, it's kind of a light straw-colored wine. It's got a very lemony flavor with a little bit. I mean, it's a little bit like this kind of pear peachy sort of overtones, but there's definitely like this lemon sort of zest to it. And sort of in the background, after it's been sitting in your palate for a few seconds, there's like just the tiniest hint of mustard. Like Dijon type mustard.
Yeah.
I'm not talking your yellow hot dog mustard. No mustard. And the really cool thing about it is that it's really inexpensive. Like I get it. I mean, I do love my occasional, luxury wines. But the cool thing about this one is it sells like $7 a bottle here in Canada, which means you can probably get it for like $1.50. And
they actually switched over the municipal water supply to it. It's so cheap. It's wonderful. The kids have never had more fun. But no, it looks like you picked a nice wine, white for a change, and normally
it's a white for a change. Let me make sure it gets into the camera here.
Yep.
And honestly, I recommend this thing. It's actually like, it's not just that it's cheap; it's actually a good wine. So.
And it's one of those things that I don't follow wine as much as I'm sure other people do, but I don't like Spain isn't the first place I consider when it comes to good wine. So
there are some great Spanish wines. Like seriously, no kidding. There are some really great Spanish wines, and perhaps just the very fact of what you just said there is one of the reasons that you can get some good inexpensive wines there.
You're letting the cat out of the bag. What are you doing? So
all right, sorry.
Yeah. We have our wine. We have our host, and why don't we go ahead and start talking about topics of today? And really, it's been a little while. I'm sure that things have happened, and some of these stories, you make them very time sensitive, but at the same time, hey, it's been a while since we covered some topics. So let's let's start somewhere. So please.
Okay, well, let's go straight to the EU. Let's go to the European Union, and I think this is interesting. I don't know what you use for an instant messaging client, but the Signal is an open source, a fully open source end-to-end encryption instant messaging client, which I do use with a handful of people. I don't have as many people on it as I would for, say, WhatsApp or something like that. And of course, WhatsApp is Facebook. Let's be honest. Facebook
Yeah.
Messenger, all that sort of stuff. So I've got like tons of people that use that stuff. But I also have a handful of people who do appreciate the completely open nature of the Signal app, and the privacy features that are built into it right from the get-go. And it's a great instant messaging client, and the European Commission has decided that that is going to be their instant messaging client of choice. And of course, they're recommending that people in general start using this thing as opposed to something like WhatsApp. And precisely for that, they don't collect your information. They don't advertise to you. They don't sell to you. There's nothing targeted about it. It is a privacy respecting, fully encrypted end-to-end instant messaging client. So I think it's big news. People always talk about the idea of privacy. It's like, oh, privacy is important to us, but nobody does anything about it.
Hmm.
Uh,
Well,
as the old joke goes.
it's you know, I haven't heard much of Signal. I've of course, I'm sorry, I've of course heard of WhatsApp, and I think the other big one is WeChat, and both of them kind of run into the same problem where, well, WeChat's China, and WhatsApp is, of course, Facebook. And when it comes to monitoring messages and things like that, at least this is a story about the EU, where as opposed to the United States, I think that I'm trying to and I know that you're in Canada, but at least in the U.S. there's I think it was the Attorney General or someone else claimed that end-to-end encryption was kind of like the antithesis of safety. It was the antithesis of uh, a modern society that law enforcement couldn't, quote, do their job and
Ah,
monitor
yes.
communications.
See, but on the other hand, I mean, on the other hand, we keep talking about things like, privacy is important, your own personal space is important. And then you've got, government agencies coming out and saying, well, privacy is good if it's us, which to me is a dangerous, dangerous road. We don't, that we want to try to avoid as much as possible. I actually do believe that a person's communications should be private as much as possible. Yes, of course, it's possible for bad actors to use these sorts of things, but it's also possible for activists, for non-GMOs, for people who are operating in countries where the governments are less than friendly toward their people, and this is the way that they can communicate without getting arrested, without getting in trouble. I fully support and endorse these types of clients for that reason, for exactly the same reason that I endorse the use of VPNs. Like, it should be possible for you to operate in a way, where somebody isn't always peeking over your shoulder. Now, if we want to talk about surveillance, then it should go in both directions. What David Brin likes to call surveillance. The state sure can keep an eye on us and so forth, but we should have the ability to fully and completely watch, what our elected officials, what our police, what our security
Right.
forces are doing, and so forth. So that road should go both ways. But if they're allowed encryption, we should be allowed encryption.
Yeah, it's uh, I think it's an argument that I have made clear here on Computer America for anyone who's been listening for a long time that end-to-end encryption, like even when government officials and really terrorism is the thing that always pops up whenever we talk about this. Whenever you have the tools in place that you can monitor communication, either A, they're talking in face to face, and no amount of digital surveillance is really going to change anything, or B, they have heard of hey. We have been monitoring this group of people, and then they go off and do something because there's so much that they're monitoring, they don't effectively take action. Um, Personally, it just seems like end-to-end encryption at the very least seems to be the safest route. So many times we've seen things that aren't encrypted end-to-end, uh, seem to fall into the hands of people more often than it saves people headaches, I guess.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't the only thing I question about Signal is and it's probably answered here in the article. Do you know you mentioned Signal is an open standard, it's open source.
It
Uh,
is.
who does anyone run it, or is it just something that you can kind of comply to?
Well, it's a signal organization, but it is a completely open, like it's an open source project, as in you can be involved in it, you can contribute to it, all that sorts of things. And the thing that's interesting as well, see, let me give you some background into just another thing that happened a little while ago. The
Sure.
Australian government, which you would think of as being a fairly open place, although there is some there's stuff happening there as well, with the wildfires and so forth. The Australian government actually gave Signal an ultimatum several months ago, and the ultimatum was based on the idea that they were trying to pass a new law that said that the government, like as in the government, in fact, their police officials and so forth, had to have the rights to have a back door to all communication systems.
I remember
And
that.
Signal said that, first of all, they couldn't comply, morally and ethically comply with that request. So that was thing number one. But the second thing they pointed out is that unlike a lot of clients where they have like a master key that they can use to snoop in on the communications, Signal's keys are generated at the time that you connect. There is no way for them to hand over a key because the keys don't exist beyond the session that you're using. So it's an interesting idea, and it does tend to sort of build up the idea that you can trust the encryption on this thing because there's nobody watching, even from the perspective of the organization that created the client in the first place.
Yeah, it's and that is I think that's the same argument that Apple has done with their system. And the EU is I don't know what's happening over in the EU, but they are laying the groundwork for so many big decisions. I think that they just, and I know it's not about open source or anything. Well, actually, it is about open source, because we just had DisplayPort on the show, DisplayPort, and they were talking about 2.0, and they were talking about their work as an open organization, and they don't do copyright fees. There's no trademark fees that people have to pay for and things like that. But my point with this is that. The EU has designated USB-C as the universal charger. Like all mobile devices and things like that, cell phones at least, have to work with USB-C going forward. And so even Apple has to comply to that. I don't know what the EU is up to, but they're really setting things in stone, like lately.
Well, there is a big push for giving citizens protection, and of course, like when the whole Cambridge Analytica scandal broke, it was a bigger deal in the UK, sorry, in the EU, UK as well, but in the EU, it was a much bigger deal there than it was in North America, because of course, well, it's like, of course, they're spying on you. I mean, we all know that they're spying on us. But they weren't happy to just leave it at that. And of course, they've pushed through, as you say, there's a bunch of legislation they pushed through, like the GDPR and all, and let me be clear, I have been critical of a lot of these things because sometimes they get in the way of actually doing things, of actually, using your software the way that you would on a day-to-day basis. I hate visiting websites where I'm continually, like every time you visit a website where you haven't been for a couple of days, it's like, we use cookies. Do you consent? Of course you use cookies. Everybody bloody well uses cookies. By now we should all know that that's how it works. But the laws are in place to remind you that you actually do have a choice to opt out of these things if you actually want to opt out. The Signal thing, by the way, Whisper Systems Inc. is the corporate entity that is behind Whisper. But again, it's a fully open source project, so anybody can get involved in it. You have access to the code at every level of it. It's funny because one of the things I put on our list, I said today's topic was civil disobedience in the Linux and open source world. So this kind of segues into it nicely, in the sense that open source has a history of ignoring laws that it figures are bad laws. And you can go back a long way for this. I mean, when browsers first came out, for instance, the SSL, the encryption format that allows you to do, secure banking and stuff like that on web browsers, was considered a munitions. So if you shared an SSL, a secure browser, like, so if you had a copy of Netscape, remember, we're going back a ways here. Yeah. You had a copy of Netscape that had the SSL stuff built in so that you could have secure communications. If you distributed it around the world under US law. Okay, you were distributing munitions, and you could be guilty of treason, and you could go to jail. I
That's
mean,
so
well,
weird.
you could be shot for it. I mean, it was crazy, like, crazy stuff. And there was also another thing when the DMCA passed in the States, the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. It was illegal to do reverse encryption. In other words, when something was encrypted, to break the encryption. And of course, all these years later, what do they want to do? They want to break the encryption on all these things, right? But the idea was, okay, so a company said, we're going to create encryption for DVDs, so you can't play out of region DVDs. So if you went like to, I don't know, to Europe, and you bought a movie and
Yeah.
you brought home and you wanted to play it on your DVD player, it was out of region. Now, if you want to crack the region code, it's a freaking offense to do this. So in the Linux happened, there was no DVD clients.
I think, Marcel, unfortunately, we are getting a little bit of signal breakup, and I'm trying to think the best way to solve this. And unfortunately, Marcel altogether has kind of frozen. So we're going to wait and see when he makes it back. Yeah, he's probably waiting in the background, just, kind of holding tight. Let me see. So, yeah, and hopefully, oh, definitely getting a little bit of breakup. Marcel, I'm going to ask you to take drastic action here, and you look to be back a little bit. The drastic action I'm going to ask you to take is, could you turn off your video? And hopefully that reduces the bandwidth needed and hopefully alleviates some of the lag. I don't think he heard me. Marcel, I'm sorry, can you hear me now? Huh. Okay, 1 second. I have just the solution for this. Let's see. So I think it's the chat, like that, and here we go. Hey, Marcel, could you turn off your video? Hopefully that works. So, yeah, and hopefully he'll get that in just a moment. And everyone out there, this might be a good, as good a time as any to kind of mention that, hey, if you like what Marcel is saying, definitely check out some of his other publications, including his YouTube channel. He posts videos on the regular there. You can, of course, check out his Patreon to support Marcel and what he does. And hey, the more support he gets, hey, the more he can do. And then on top of that, you can do his Flipboard and his website, where you can also find Cooking with Linux and, of course, his new podcast, Tic Tac Toe, which we're going to be talking here in just a moment. But yeah, so hey, that was the best attempt at a time filler. One moment. Hopefully this. Let's see. So, unfortunately, it seems like he's completely frozen. It's not good. Okay, so unfortunately, man. Oh
Are you
no,
there?
there are two Marcels. Marcel, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, this is really weird.
Yeah, there's two Marcels in the chat.
I don't even know I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah, so let's see. I can remove the other one.
I don't know what happened. I don't know what's going on.
That
I
is so
don't
weird.
understand
So
anything.
yeah, so and let's see. So but you can hear me, and your connection seems to have steadied out. I don't know if it was on my end or your end.
I have no
Really can't
idea.
tell.
It's the internet. It's the internet. We must blame the internet.
It's the internet's fault. So, with that being said, I think, Marcel, what we're going to do, I can just, kind of cut out this middle section, the last 5 minutes or so. I'm still recording. So, um, I think I'm going to ask for just like 5 seconds of silence just so I can see where we stop talking and where to pick it up. And then let's pick it up. I don't know. We were just talking, and I'm trying to figure out where we were just before the connection got really, really bad. Um, I think we were talking about, of course, EU privacy. You were talking about the munitions trafficking of. No. You were just talking about region locked DVDs. So if you want to pick it up from that kind of idea, I can just cut these two together and it'll be fine.
Well, I can't actually see myself on your screen anymore, so I'm going to pretend that it's actually.
Well, I changed it so, but you can see me, right?
I can see you fine. Don't worry
Okay.
about it. It's totally cool.
So the only thing is that your video was a little pink for some reason.
You know what? We're going to pretend. We'll pretend it's all okay. All right. We'll just look the other way and pretend it's all okay. I have no idea what's going on. It's because I'm in Venice. And night is falling there.
That has to be it. Your nice twilight hour. So okay, so like 5 seconds, and then if you'd like to pick up, let's just say where if you want to region lock things. So all right, so 5 seconds. Here we go.
Okay, so anyway, so the whole region locked DVD thing, what they did was they distributed this key called libDVD CSS so that you could play it. But like I said, this was a felony offense. So all of a sudden, the idea of being able to legally play media that you legally own on a computer that you legally owned was somehow conceivably an offense. Now, it gets weirder. You remember I talked about the decryption keys for secure communications, the RSA key, the RSA decryption key.
Right.
That was also, at the time, what they did in the open source community is they created this T-shirt where they had, like, we're talking like 3 or 4 lines of Perl code is all it took for the decryption key, for the RSA decryption key. And people had it on a T-shirt, and they had things like, this T-shirt is a felony offense and things like that. So they basically said, these are stupid laws, and we're just going to ignore these stupid laws. And the same thing happens with things like Signal and encrypted communications. It's like, well, you're not allowed encrypted communication. You know what? I don't care if we're not allowed. We're still going to go ahead and do it anyway. So I think that there are times, especially, and the open source community has actually been very good about doing these sorts of things, and very good, I'll put in double quotes or in air quotes, because historically, when they've seen that the law is a stupid law, they basically just ignore it. And it's not just the open source community that does this. There are a whole bunch of things that you're not supposed to do, but we all do anyway. And we won't go into what they all are at this moment, but the open source community is well known for these sorts of things, like VPN clients, all sorts of things.
Well, VPN clients they're definitely allowed. I would say it's more
depends on where you are. Depends on where you are.
Yeah, that's true. And I would say it's kind of things like sometimes the legislation when it comes to technology is very, very backwards. And one of my favorite is just that people who record video of themselves, either through live streaming or just kind of recording a video walking on the street. Let's say that you walk past a restaurant that's playing an artist in the background. They will actually mute and demonetize your entire video if it's just faintly in the background because you did not get express permission from the artist to use their song in your video. It's stupid. No one is going to go to name big artists here and say, hey, I got like 4 seconds of your song in the background. Can I use it? And, no one does that. But hey, it's how technology works.
I said I was critical. I said despite the fact that I do admire the European Union for getting out there and putting people's personal lives. We talk about the idea that the gold, the gold we exchange on the internet these days is information. Mm-hmm. It's personal information, personal data. Where have you been? What do you watch? What do you listen to? What do you shop for? All that sort of stuff. And they've decided to put that stuff out front. And in fact, there have been laws even in the U.S. I sometimes beat up on the US, but COPPA is a big thing that gets a lot of discussion. Are you familiar with COPPA? COPPA?
SOPA, PIPA, COPPA, I think falls in line somewhere in the same vein. Not expressly familiar because I don't think it's close to passing, but
Well,
yeah.
actually, it has passed.
Oh,
It's
it has
actually
passed.
law now. Okay,
I
COPPA
dropped
in
the ball. I'll be
yeah.
honest. I dropped it.
Okay, COPPA in the states is there are a lot of YouTube channels that are aimed at children, for instance. Okay, and I mean, they're aimed at children because it's all about kids' toys and kids' videos and stuff like that. And COPPA said that you could no longer do targeted advertising to children, and that if your content on YouTube was specifically made for children or featured children in video, okay, that you had to label it as such. And if you
Mm.
didn't, I mean, you could get strikes against you, you could be demonetized, all these other sorts of things. But it is now law. So if you create content on YouTube and you have a monetized channel, you have to identify whether that content, well, actually, even if you're not
You know,
monetized.
and funny that you mention it. Obviously we upload everything to YouTube. That we do here for the show, and they changed the recent upload, kind of
Yes.
format for YouTube. And one of the key things is like you have to expressly, kind of either click yes or no. Is this content designed or made for children?
Yeah.
And I gotta say, it was funny. Like the first time that I had to use that system to upload something to YouTube, we had just had on the program a company that made like not virtual reality, but like mixed reality content for kids. Like think uh there's an adult meditation app that got all the press a little bit ago. It's like Relax or something like that. Anyways, it was like
Um,
that for kids with like cartoon characters, and there were
mhm.
like little comic books and stuff like that. And it was funny because the first time I uploaded with the new system, it was like, is this content designed for kids? And I'm like, the content that I'm talking about is designed for kids, but I'm talking with the founder and CEO, so I'm gonna go no. And
Yeah.
it confused me for a little bit. I just found that funny, but yeah, YouTube, they have changed their system so that everything is explicitly yes for kids, no for kids.
Do you go out of your way? I've had a lot of discussions about these sorts of things lately. Do you use any of the alternative? Like everybody complains about the targeted advertising and the way that Facebook works and stuff like that, but not a lot of people do much about it. It's like again, we're back to that old joke. Everybody's talking about this. Everybody talks about the weather, but nobody does anything about it. But except in this case, it's privacy. Everybody talks about privacy, but nobody does anything about it. Some do. Do you use any of the alternate systems like MeWe.com, for instance? MEWE.com is an alternative to Facebook. It's actually championed by Tim Berners-Lee, the father of the internet, the father of the World Wide Web. Sir Tim Berners-Lee. He's on the board of directors. And it is one, there you go, MeWe.com. I'm actually on MeWe.com, and I am trying to use it as much as possible as an alternative to Facebook. No ads, no spyware. They don't track you. They don't collect information about you. It is a privacy-focused alternative to Facebook. And I'm trying to, as much as possible, put my money where my mouth is these days in terms of the sorts of things that I do. And in fact, I give these guys, $5 a month. I have what they call one of their premium memberships. It is completely free. You don't have to, but if you want to if you want to support them, if you want to support the project, it is one of those things that you can do. And I personally do it myself. So by the way, if somebody wants to, follow me or whatever on MeWe.com, you can do
Hmm.
that. Maybe I should put the links in the show notes for that. But there are also things like Mastodon.social, which is a decentralized alternative to Twitter and so forth. So there are tools that you can use that actually do respect your privacy. Signal is like we were talking about Signal as a starting point.
Right.
You can have instant messaging clients that respect your privacy, that do not advertise to you, that do not collect your data. You can do the same thing with your social networks, which is why I mentioned MeWe. You can do the same thing if you want a microblogging client with Mastodon. There are alternatives out there.
And I have had companies like that on the show. I've heard about that. Companies that do respect your privacy and services like that. The problem, and especially when it comes to social sites, like it's not even like a video game site. It's not even like a how-to site. It's
You want
express.
to be where everybody else is.
Exactly. And unfortunately, your grandmother, your family, your kids, they're not on MeWe, they're not on Mastodon. They could be, and given all things that we've found out over the past 5-10 years, they probably should be. But complacency and people just familiar with Facebook, and they're just not going to switch for any old reason. Like it really seems like, and trust me, Facebook's giving people reasons, but none big enough to, really like. I think, let's see, they had a couple of scandals last year. They went from 2 billion monthly active users, and now I think they're at about 2.9 billion monthly active users.
Yeah, well, but you can question a lot. I mean, how many of those are bots, right? I mean, it's one of those things that you
Tons,
can
tons,
question.
tons, especially Twitter,
Yeah.
tons.
Yeah, so those numbers, I mean, those numbers are great, but it's questionable. But think about this for a second, okay? Like you want to go where the people are, and usually you want to go where the people are if you're a business person. In other words, like if I want to make money with my videos, for instance, it's not like, I mean, I've got 2,300 subscribers or something like that on YouTube. I'm not a big YouTube channel, but if I wanted to, if I wanted to make this my life, if I wanted to be a big YouTuber. Um, I'm going to go to YouTube because that's
Yeah.
where the audience is and that's where the potential for making money is. But if you're on a social network for the express purpose of hanging out with your family and friends and so forth, it should be possible. In fact, it shouldn't be all that complicated, okay, to be able to assemble those people under a different umbrella. And again, I'll use MeWe as an example, although there are other alternatives as well. And of course, they already have like, I mean, I don't know how many members they've got, but they have like a few million members that are sitting on there. So it's not like there's nobody there. It's not like there's only 5 or 6 people. So the idea that you want to go to Facebook specifically because everybody is there is a little bit of an illusion. Okay, because you say, well, 1.6 billion people are there, or 2 billion people are there. Yeah, but how many of those 2 billion people do you know?
Yeah,
And how
that's
many of
true.
those 2 billion people are you going to communicate with? My parents, in their list of friends on Facebook, like I've got, I don't know, 500, 600, but in my parents have got like 20 people. It doesn't take anything for my parents to, be in a different place with 20 people. There's nothing to it.
Yeah, transferring these little groups, these little communities, just your social circle, uh, doesn't seem that hard. But I guess you kind of have to admit that, like, even if I don't interact with those 2 billion people, any one of those 2 billion people, though, they're going to create the next viral post, the next cat, sneezing. I gotta be on there to see that. Um, Really, but I mean, that's also a good thing for things like WeMe, where um I'm sorry, MeWe, not WeMe. Excuse me. Wow. For MeWe is that as more people go, it's a very momentum has a way of just adding people, because the more people that go, the more people talk about it. Blah blah blah. Things can change. It's just uh, and I want to say that things don't change quickly. 12 years ago, Facebook wasn't even a thing,
Yeah,
and
and
yeah.
and like obviously that this is a Linux show, although it's often the open source show as opposed to specifically. But I mean, Linux and open source is something that I've been championing and I've been pushing for like I don't know 25 years now or something like that. I mean, I've been pushing this stuff for a long time. But here's the thing, okay? Um, at one point it was like, well, Linux is never going to have any traction. Linux is now the most popular used operating system in the world. I mean, Windows is like a distant second to the number of Linux systems that are out there that power the internet. Chromebooks are all Linux. Your Android phone is all Linux. The basis of even iOS, of Apple's operating system, is a collection of open source software, not specifically Linux. It's probably got more BSD than but it is no longer this thing that's in the margins. We don't even see it anymore. It is so pervasive. It's in your television. It's in your thermostat. It's in your Google Home unit, your Alexa unit, your Google, whatever the heck whatever the heck the Apple version of a Google Home and an Alexa is.
I think it's HomeKit.
whatever it's called. I mean, nobody has one anyway. It's except for my brother. My brother is the only person I know that has an Apple version of an Alexa or Google Home unit. But the point is, all of those things run Linux. All of those things run open source software. So yeah, sometimes momentum takes a while to build. And like you said, 12 years ago, Facebook wasn't a thing, right?
Yeah.
So the idea that there could be alternatives that we will eventually all find ourselves using is not that crazy, you know. But part of what we have to do is, if we believe in something, if you do believe in privacy, if you don't want to be advertised to, and I don't know about you, I hate the fact that Twitter and Facebook are continually turning off my settings for for most recent things. I want to see things in chronological order. No, it's like, no, you want to see the top post, which means you can see the post that your friend put up 6 weeks ago because 2 new people decided to make a comment about that cat video. Well, you know what?
It's that, and the reason they do that, it's these companies have figured out the best way to monetize the platform, and it involves things like a certain way the user interface works, which is even on a desktop computer, it looks like a mobile feed. The endless scroll feature lets people use it for longer, and then of course advertising within and promoted post, and
Well, of course I know all that. That doesn't mean I have to like it.
Of course, I'm just saying that they have a reason, and it's not because they're not it's not because they don't know how to save a setting. It's because they purposely don't want to save your settings.
Oh, by the way, I should probably I give a nod to I've actually found an extension that I use for Chrome. You can get it for Firefox as well. It's called FB Purity, f.b.purity. And what it does is it lets you control the settings for things like Facebook so that it will reset your stream so that it's always most recent. You can block certain things, highlight certain things. It's fantastic. I love this thing. I recommend it to everybody.
Certainly interesting. And by the way, one last thing I wanted to mention about social media before we switch topics here. And this article looks like we could kind of segue, of course, the sustainability called in question for open source. But one thing I wanted to mention that everyone out there, this seems to be, not a very common topic, but I want everyone to know you're allowed to lie on Facebook. You're allowed to lie on Twitter. I know that your name may not be Marcel Gagné, but you can make it Marcel Gagné. You may not live in Cameroon, but you can say you live in Cameroon. Obviously, there are many metrics that are measured that you cannot change, of course, unless you use things like VPNs that we talked about and other things. But when it comes to personal information, you can lie, and we're all concerned about privacy and things like that. I think a big part of it is that no one lies on social media because they want, they for some reason people want to tell the truth. It's human nature. They want to be honest, and yeah, you're allowed to lie to Facebook. I guess that's my answer.
You're allowed to pretend that you're in Venice when you're chatting on Computer America.
Exactly. And by the way, it looks beautiful there. The sunset has gone away. You look good. So, with that being said, I've just told everyone listening to the show to lie as often as they can. Why don't we go ahead and talk about this next topic you hear under news?
Well, we'll just give a quick nod to that. The reason I thought that was interesting is it's one of those stories that talks about how can open source projects communicate and survive. It talks about things like burnout and so forth, but more importantly, what it mentions is that most of the major open source projects that you're aware of, including things obviously like the Linux kernel itself, they're all people working for a living for big corporations. They're working for IBM, they're working for Google, they're working for Microsoft. And you don't think about Microsoft as being a huge supporter of open source, but they hire like tons of people who work on Linux kernel, who work on open source software and so forth. I mean, it's an open source world, and the idea that sustainability of open source projects isn't possible because it doesn't have corporate backing is completely flawed, because it's almost all corporate backed. All of the major projects are corporate backed, and I hate the headline, because the headline is kind of makes it sound like it throws the idea that sustainability is possible into question. No, it's actually the other way around. It's like those. I hate the headline because in the same way that I hate headlines that say, Did so and so do this, or is this something like that? And the answer is always no. Like if you
But
actually
then it's a 10-minute video. Yeah.
exactly, if you go to the clickbait link, the answer is always no. That's not the case. It's like, oh, there's a rumor that could it be true? No, it's obviously not true. So I think we can probably safely skip
Sure.
right past the topic of the day about civil disobedience and so forth, because I think we've kind of covered it. And
Well,
and
and even with that being said, I did want to get a little bit up about tic tac toe in there, because you do cover a lot of interesting topics, and the latest episode here you have here as well. Just quickly, what would you talk about?
oh well, on the latest TikTok.
Valentine's Day. You worked on Valentine's Day. What are you doing?
What? Oh,
February 14th. February 14th. You dropped it on Valentine's Day.
I did. I dropped it on Valentine's Day. Well, there was a good reason for it. Anyway, no, sorry, where was I going here?
The topic of this.
Yeah, no, Valentine's Day is just another day. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It doesn't sound very romantic, but I think we're up to technically we're up to episode 11 at the moment, and it is actually a podcast that talks about things like open source in a lot of things, but we also cover things like superhero movies and breakfast cereal and comedy specials. I mean, we did one that was on Dave Chappelle, for instance. So a lot of weirdo information gets covered. We did we did one where I thought my car had been stolen, and we wound up meeting at a Wendy's, and that's where we did the podcast. But the interesting one, and I don't know if I linked to it there, maybe if I haven't, I should do it, is my latest one. It's actually on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Marcel Gagne/freethinker@large. And we did it in VR. We went in alt space VR, and we recorded it. There it is. And we recorded a podcast episode in alt space VR. And I asked my co-host, Evan Leibovich, and I said, this would be fun. Let's give this a try just for a laugh. So we set up our topics beforehand. It's kind of hard to refer to your notes when you've got a headset on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So you sort of have to talk about it a little bit beforehand. And I've spent a lot of time in VR. I've been following VR for several years as well. It's another one of my passions. I'm kind of totally into it. And Evan hasn't been doing that. He wound up buying an Oculus Go because he wasn't sure whether he wanted to spend the money on a really good headset. So he went cheap, but I invited him into alt space and we did a podcast there. I set up a remote avatar, talk about lying, like a fake version of myself, through whose eyes I could record the conversation that we were doing. And it's just kind of a nifty idea. I think this is the social network of the future. We're not there yet. We're almost there. But I think increasingly you're going to see a lot of people meeting in this virtual space where you can literally be anybody you want, anything you want. I don't know if you've ever gone into VR chat, but there are people who
it gets weird. It gets weird.
Do you have a VR headset yet?
I have used them at trade shows and things like that. I do not have one. I'm finally getting my office set up that I could have one if I wanted one. And if I did, I have been looking at the Oculus Quest.
Yes, I have an Oculus Quest. The beauty about I have a whole pile of them at this point, but the wonderful thing about the Quest, and it's the one I use like pretty much all the time now, is that there are no tethers. Like you are completely free to wander around. You're not going to run into a cable. It's fantastic. I absolutely love it. And doing the podcast episode, although it was a little bit strange, in particular, it was strange for Evan because Evan's just not used to this sort of thing. Mm-hmm. It was really kind of a cool thing to do. And I'm exploring doing that in other environments, like Mozilla Hubs, for instance. I did mention that. Is that me?
No, that was me. Go ahead.
Okay. I in the show notes there, I have a link to Mozilla Hubs, which is another alternative to an open source a virtual world. And the reason Mozilla Hubs is interesting to me is it is a completely free open source virtual world like alt space or like VR chat or like Rec Room, for instance. It's not quite as well developed, but you can create worlds on the fly. Okay. And you can invite people into those worlds. The avatars aren't as cool as they are in some of the other systems or whatever, but this thing is completely open source and you can access those VR worlds from a headset, any headset for that matter. You can access it from a browser. You can access it from your smartphone. See, you're doing it right there.
Yeah, it
It
does
is
not take too much to set up, and obviously I skipped everything
it
from the
takes
micro.
it takes nothing, and I've invited people into it, and I've had little get-togethers in Mozilla hubs. And again, it's not quite as developed. It's not quite the same thing, but you can create worlds that persist that you can go into a later time. I should add you to my Discord, and we could play with creating a couple of these things. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, it's a really neat idea, and it's another one of those open source projects that to me shows an incredible amount of promise because, of course, it's completely detached from the Facebooks of the world, from the Microsofts of the world, and so forth. So, if you want to create this virtual environment for you and your friends, but you don't want to have to deal with, you know, being in this, advertising sustained world in one way, shape, or form, or you there you go. You can take a picture of yourself and you can tilt the camera and adjust it and stuff like that. It takes a while to get used to the
Oh,
keyboard
Q&E.
controls.
Yeah, it's I, and I said that I don't use virtual reality. I have been a strong believer in the technology. It's like when people try it, it's so different from sitting at a computer and a keyboard and mouse. Even though I think keyboard and mouse for productivity reasons, is going to trump VR for a long time to come. But when it comes to different experience, and especially like this is going to change the way that we kind of interact with people because
I agree. I agree. I
yeah,
think this is a much bigger deal than a lot of people think. Um, like you're still playing inside hubs there. One of the things you can do, like there are rooms you can on the fly change the way the room and the world works, that you operate in. So yeah, so you brought up the menu there. You can say, pick a different world, like pick a different name, pick a different world, a different environment that you're in. I can't see your screen all that well there. I can sort of see it.
yeah. Well, it's telling me continuously to essentially sign up, make an account, blah blah blah. But
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
anyway, but you can do that. You can change the rooms, but you can do things like put up a PowerPoint presentation inside a room or play a video inside this thing. So you can actually use this as a virtual meeting place for serious applications. Oh, so or watching cat videos. Take your pick.
yeah. It's a very very cool way to kind
It
of go about
is.
this, and of course, you know. To make the groundwork for this, Mozilla as an organization, they're not the smallest organization, but at the same time, they don't have, all the resources in the world. Thanks to things like the Unity project with, creating the graphics and things like that, this probably didn't take too much to make the framework for it. And yeah, now everyone
Well,
gets to benefit
the
from it.
framework. This framework is actually an open. It's an open standard, by the way. It's like so. It's available to everybody. It's actually called WebVR.
Hmm.
WEBVR. It's not a Mozilla thing specifically, but it is a standard that and there are people who build games who actually build virtual reality games inside WebVR. And then there's also WebXR, which is extended reality, where we can start having it as you know real applications of the real world. In fact, I did this the other day. Like you and I right now are doing Zoom. I did this with somebody where you can use your own camera on your PC
Hmm.
and you can have your face floating on a screen inside the VR world where
Like,
everybody else is.
yeah, kind
It's
of like Zod or something. Yeah.
it is wild. So I think that this technology has huge promise, and it is an open technology. It's yet another one of those things. Yeah, I love my games. I do. Like before we did this, I was playing Drop Dead Dual Strikes. I was killing zombies. And by the way, if you've ever fought zombies in virtual, like if you've ever fought zombies on a PC or on a computer or something like that,
Hmm.
drop into virtual reality and do it. It's like when they're sitting like a foot away from you and they're clawing at you, it is a completely different experience than it is, doing it on a tablet or on a PC screen. holy crap! I mean, your heart rate is going up. It's pretty exciting.
And really that's what I like about VR is that even kind of crude things that you think are like cartoony, there have been instances where like it's not photorealistic at all, but they essentially put VR headsets on people and then they put them in like a cartoon world where they're walking on a board over a skyscraper, and they have the same reaction as if they would in the real world. Like
Yes.
it doesn't take photorealism to get the same reaction.
No, it doesn't, and that's where that term immersive comes from.
Yeah.
It is immersive. Everything that you see, everything that you hear, is inside that world. And I think you know this, and I'm sure I've mentioned it on the show at one time. Oh, our distribution focus. Are we running out of time? Should we spend a couple of minutes doing our
We got like
distribution?
5 minutes, I think.
All right, in that case, then let's jump to our distribution focus because I think this thing is actually really cool.
Sure.
I ran across this purely by accident. I saw a release note, I don't know, on Twitter or something like that. And what it is it's called Extern OS, EXTERNOS, and it's by I'm trying to think of his name. I'm gonna totally mess up his name because I don't have it at the moment sitting in front of me. Anesu Chiodze, and I apologize, Anesu, if I'm pronouncing your name wrong. But he has created this distribution, which is currently in, I think it's beta 2.2 or something like that. It's freaking gorgeous. And it's different because it uses an HTML5 slash JavaScript. It uses nw.js, which is a JavaScript library to drive the desktop, to drive the screen. So it's a completely different way of doing these things. It's a way of doing it that hasn't been done before. Like typically, you've got a graphical environment that's very specific to the distribution that you're working with, or what you've got is you've got a like the X window environment, which is the classic environment for Linux desktop. This thing uses something entirely different. And because he's using a WebJS or a JavaScript framework, he can give it a look and feel and a kind of a sort of ethereal feel to it that you're not going to get off a standard heavy duty desktop environment. And it's just kind of gorgeous. It's beautiful.
Yeah, I was I have so many tabs open now. I was looking through this, and it really does seem like they're you know not I don't say not permanent, but they're not as, I guess, solid would be a way to put it. Uh,
That's a good way to, that's why I use the word ethereal. It
yeah,
feels like it almost feels kind of, like and interestingly enough, it's kind of what I would expect it to look like if you were to build a desktop in virtual space, just to combine the whole VR thing. The idea that the windows are just sort of floating up there, accessible by you. It's like I said, it's a beautiful desktop. I'm fascinated by the fact that this is actually something new. It actually uses, I mean, it runs all of the classic, like it's based on Ubuntu underneath, like under the surface, it's actually an Ubuntu, a recent Ubuntu release. But the look and feel of it is really new. It's something different. And I like the idea that there's somebody out there who's sort of, saying, we've done it this way for a long time. Let's try doing it differently.
would you say this is more for people who would be your Mint users, or is this something that maybe has like you mentioned JavaScript, maybe like programmers would be more for this because they could do more with it? Who would you say this would really
Well, I
gravitate
think
towards this?
programmers would find it interesting because it gives programmers a flexibility to create desktop apps that they don't have with other things. Like one of the cool things about web-based apps nowadays is that we can put almost anything in a browser, as you know, like almost anything in a browser, right?
Yeah.
And some of the apps that you can put in a browser these days don't look like they should belong in a browser. I mean, they're gorgeous. They're beautiful things, that operate entirely inside Google Chrome or whatever. So yeah, I think this would be of great interest to developers. But I'd like to see this thing, jump a couple more releases. I'm not ready to run it as my desktop operating system yet. But in a couple of months, in 2 or 3 months, we'll see how this goes. You may find me running that as my desktop. We'll see where it goes. But I'm fascinated. This is actually one of the cooler Linux desktop environments that I've seen in a long time.
Yeah, it certainly does look it, and of course, as long as you can do everything, then why not do it a different way? And looking at some of his required specs, of course, he's already mentioned that those don't apply anymore. But if it's lightweight and it works, then hey, why not have people challenge what is considered traditional? So
Did I mention that it's freaking gorgeous? Like it's
it is.
beautiful.
It is almost I don't want to say like a strictly in a strictly minimalist way, but it does look very, very good. So,
Yep.
but of course, link in the show notes. And Marcel, I think we're going to go ahead and have to call it there. Obviously, we had some technical difficulties there in the middle, so I'm assuming.
Yeah, I blame the network. I don't know where in the network this went wrong, but something happened somewhere along the way.
One of the pipes of the internet definitely messed
Right.
up. So Marcel, if people want to find out more, where's the best place to go?
You can go to my website, marcelgagne.com, or if you want, you can just go and find me on YouTube, youtube.com/Marcel Gagne or youtube.com/FreeThinkerAtLarge. And on Twitter, I haven't been updating my website for ages. It's
Yeah, I saw
terrible.
the Happy Halloween title. I was like, oh,
Oh
goodness.
God, it's awful. Yeah, no. For some reason, I've been ignoring my personal websites and I've been concentrating on things like Twitter. I mean, if you go to Twitter, if you go to just WFTL, like the 4 letters, writer and free thinker at large, WFTL, twitter.com/WFTL. That's a great place to find me. You'll see recent posts from me there. And I routinely tell people, like even on Twitter, I routinely tell people, hey, you can check me out on Mastodon or check me out on MeWe or something like that. Like I said, I'm trying to put my money where my mouth is in terms of using some of these privacy-focused services as much as possible. And of course, I'm on Facebook as well, facebook.com/Marcel Gagne. So I'm all over the place. What can I tell you?
There you go. Yeah, anywhere you are, Marcel is probably too, even behind you. Don't look. But with that being said, everyone, thank you so much for tuning in to Computer America. And Marcel, we're looking forward to, of course, next time. Everyone, can't say it's as regular, but he is scheduled for every third Thursday of the month here on Computer America. Until next time, everyone, have a great day. Thank you so much. And
Cheers.
Thank you so much. Cheers.